In this video, we're going to look at how you can set up a rubric in your Blackboard course and use that rubric for grading your students' work. Using rubrics in Blackboard has a number of advantages to it. First, it gives your students information about what you're grading on and the kind of things that you're looking for. Second, for you as an instructor, rubrics can actually be used in the grading process to simplify grading and to cut down on the amount of time you spend doing that work. If you're planning on using rubrics in your Blackboard course, it's usually a good idea to plan your rubric out ahead of time in a Word document. Because Blackboard does time out sometimes, and because rubrics can take a little while to plan, thinking things through ahead of time in a place where you're not going to get logged out can make the process a little bit easier and will help to ensure that you don't lose your work as you're going through the process. To build a rubric into your Blackboard course, you're first going to come to the menu to the left of the screen and to click on your course tools. Under Course Tools, you're going to find an option called Rubrics. And if you click on Rubrics, that will take you through to a list of all of the rubrics that already exist in your course. And it will also give you the option to create a rubric. So that's what I'm going to do from here by clicking on that Create Rubric button to the top left of the screen. Now when I do that, Blackboard's going to take me through to the rubric template. So the first thing it's going to need is a name. So I will call this Assignment 1. And if I go down a little further, I can see the actual rubric template. Now, Blackboard does offer a lot of flexibility around the rubric template. It does require this gridded structure with the columns and the rows, but there are a lot of different things you can do within that to help make the rubric exactly what you need for your particular assignment and the grading that you are doing. So the first thing to note is up here at the top of the screen, you have an option called Rubric Type. And you actually have 5 different types of rubrics that you can do here for the grading. So you can do a rubric that has no points attached to it, or you can do a rubric that has value, and those values can be in the form of points, a point range, a percentage, or a percent range. So for the sake of this rubric, I think I'm going to go with a point range. And if I go back and have a look at that sample rubric that I'm working from, one thing you'll notice is that I actually have 3 different rows, but 4 columns. And so with the Blackboard rubric, if I come back over here, I can add an extra column if I need one, and that will just put that column over to the side here. I can do the same thing with rows if there are more things that I'm looking to evaluate students on. So I can add them if I want to. I also have the option to take them away if there are too many. So if I say have too many rows that I'm working with here, I can come to the drop down for any given row, click on it, and select the delete option. So now that I have my basic rubric set up the way that I need it, I can start moving around some of the different pieces that are going to help me with the grading. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my rubric here and I'm going to see what my levels of achievement are. So we can see that I've got 4 different levels of achievement: excellent, competent, developing, and needs improvement. And I want to make sure that these are represented on my rubric. So if I come over here, we can see that what Blackboard has is a little bit different. We've got novice, competent, proficient, and the column that I added, but I can edit all of these to be whatever I want them to be. So if I come to the novice column and I click on the drop down next to it, I can go in and I can select edit, and I can say excellent, and then click on save to save that. Competent here is fine. And then instead of proficient, I've decided to call that developing. So I will click that, change it to developing. And then if I come over here to my new column, I can also click on its dropdown, select edit, and say needs improvement. So now I can do the same thing with my criteria. And if I have a look at that original rubric, I'm looking to grade students on their argument, their support, and their organization. So all I have to do is come over here where I see formatting. I can click on its dropdown, click on edit, and change that to argument. Organization is already here, but I would actually like it a little bit lower. So I'm actually going to edit this one and say support. And then I'm going to come down here to that final row, click on its dropdown, click on edit, and change that to organization. So once I have that settled, I can start to work with some of the point values. So I've done a points range, which means that I'm going to have to put in 2 numbers for each option here. And in my case, I think the argument's a pretty important thing in the assignment that I'm doing. So I'm going to say 0 to 2 points, 2 to 4 points, 4 to 6 points, and 6 to 8 points. I think I'm going to do the same thing for support. So I'm going to change that 6 to 8, 4 to 6, 2 to 4, and 0 to 2. Then I think for organization, maybe I'll value that a little bit less. So we'll go 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. And then once I have that in, it's really just a case of putting in any of the descriptions that I want in these boxes. So the other advantage of having this document ready to go is that I can simply copy and paste the pieces that I need. So in this case, I am going to grab the text that I've written for an argument that is excellent. And I'm just going to paste it in here. And I'll do that for the rest of this row, one at a time, and just making sure that the formatting looks okay as I go. So then once I have this all ready to go, I filled in all of the boxes, assigned all of the points, made all of the changes that I want, I can click on Submit, and that will save my rubric. Once you've set up a rubric in Blackboard, you can use that rubric for grading an assignment. To set that up, I'm going to go first into Assignments. I'm going to come up to Assessments and choose the Assignment option. So for this assignment, I'm going to call it Assignment 1. And most of the assignment setup is the same as it would be for any other assignment. I'm going to need to give the assignment a name. I can put in some instructions for students to follow. Give it some points. But down here in the points section, you'll notice that you have the option to add a rubric. So if I click on that option, I can either select a rubric that I've already made. I can create a new rubric from here, which is the same process that I just went through to make that rubric in the first place. Or I can create a rubric from an existing one. So if I have one that I want to use, but I maybe want to edit it a little bit, I can do that instead. In this case, I've already made my rubric, so I'm just going to choose Select Rubric, which will pull up a list of my rubrics, choose the one that I want, and I'll click on Submit. And when I do this, Blackboard is going to ask if I want it to assign the value of the rubric as the points possible. So if the rubric has those points attached to it, Blackboard can default to making that what the assignment is worth, particularly if it's different than the value that I already put in. Right, so once I've put the rubric in there, one thing that is important to note is that the default setting for Blackboard is that the rubric is not visible to students. In most cases, it's really helpful for students to have a rubric ahead of time, so you can change this by hovering over the drop down here And you can choose yes with rubric scores or yes without rubric scores. Because I want them to see the scoring, I'm going to choose yes with rubric scores in this case. And from here, I also have the option to delete the rubric if I don't want it anymore, to view the rubric if I want to check that it's the same one, or if I want to edit the rubric, I can do that from here as well. So that's really all there is. The rest of this can get set up the same way you would for a normal assignment, and then I will click on Submit, and the rubric will be ready to go. So if I were a student who was submitting my assignment, I went in and had a look at that assignment that has a rubric attached to it, you'll see here that at the top of the screen, I have the option to view that rubric. So if I click on that, I will see exactly what I'm being graded on, the different criteria, the different levels of achievement, the value of each, and the specific things that my instructor is looking for. In addition to assignments, rubrics in Blackboard can be attached to other kinds of graded assessments, such as discussion boards, blogs, or journals. So if you feel like using your rubric for something else, that's an option as well. When you go in to do the grading for any assignment that has a rubric attached to it, you're going to go into Grade Center and then Needs Grading, just like you usually would. You access the student assignments in the same way that you would for any other assignment, but you have a few extra options here if you're using the rubric. So if you come over to the side here, on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's this thin little blue drop-down. And if you click on that, that's going to give you access to the rubric. So if you are grading by the rubric, there are two different ways that you can do this. The first one is that you can click here on the name of the assignment, and that will give you, first of all, a really brief version of your rubric with just your criteria and your levels of achievement, and you can use that by clicking the radio buttons to choose what students get on different elements of their work. And you can see here that when I do that, because I've got a points range, I have a couple different options that I can choose between. Depending on how you've set up your rubric, these options will look a little different, whether there's a range or whether it's just points or a straight percentage. Now, if this isn't enough information for me to work from, or if I need a little bit of a reminder of the things that I'm evaluating, I can also choose to show descriptions by clicking on this box right here, which will give me a little bit more detail in terms of these options. I can also, if I want, choose to show feedback. So if I want to give specific feedback on any particular element of what students have done, that option is available to me as well. The other thing to take note of is that as you check off these boxes, because there are actually points associated with them, way down at the bottom here, Blackboard is creating a total based on that. So rather than you having to sum up these values yourself, Blackboard will do that work because the rubric has been written so that it has those values associated with it already. Now, if you would prefer to see your rubric in sort of its original chart form, you can do that as well. So if we come back up here to the top, instead of clicking on the link here that designates the rubric, if you click on this icon over to the right-hand side, that will actually give you access to the full rubric. And if you want to use this instead, you can use that in the same way. You just check off whatever level of achievement the student has met. And you'll see that once again, you've got feedback options here. So you can put in a little bit more detail if you want to. And then down at the bottom, we once again have that score being calculated. And we also have a general feedback to learner area that you can put in more detail if you want. And so once I'm done with that, choose to save that rubric. And then once I click Submit, all of that information will go into the Grade Center and the rubric will be available to the student so that they can see all of that feedback.